Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this week's edition of the Thursday Talk Training Talent Series presented by IHM Aurangabad in association with our media partners, Today's Traveler. Our discussion today with our esteemed panelists will see the industry through the eyes of those experts who are learning and development professionals in hospitality and healthcare. We will be discussing current challenges in managing training, contemporary best practices, and leadership perspectives. Without further ado, we will get going. I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished panelists at this juncture for the discussion. Our first panelist is the Learning and Development Manager for Hub Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and Madhya Pradesh with the Indian Hotels Company Limited. May I request you, Tushar, to share with us your journey and how your professional life has been after graduation.
Thank you. Firstly, namaskar to everyone, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. I think it's a pleasure to interact with all of you, the colleagues on the call, and also those who are attending this virtually. So, starting from personal journey, I think I've been from Aurangabad, and IHM Aurangabad happens to be. I was just telling somebody before the call that hotel management and IHM Aurangabad happened by chance. But now, when I look back at it, and I think I was made to do this, and I'm very proud to be where I am. And there have been a lot of stakeholders in this process who've made my life successful and till the stage I've reached so far. There have been challenges, ups and downs, but I think through the journey within the Taj, and now it's been more than 10 years with IHCL Taj. I've also briefly worked with the Lalit Group and the Carlson Group, but this is my second innings with the Taj, and I don't think there will ever be a third inning. I'm very confident. I'm very happy. I'm very. I feel there is a lot to learn and a lot to achieve while I'm here, and Taj and Tatas are a world for me. So while yes, I don't mind working with other companies, but I think this is where I belong, and I mean that's where I am, and I'm hoping to go from here. Thank you.
That's wonderful. That has been quite inspirational, actually, for not many of students here. I must say that's an illustrious career you have had with many organizations. Moving on to the next panelist, Aditi Deo. She's the L&D specialist with eClinicalWorks at Ahmedabad. She is a seasoned expert from the class of 2010 at IHMA. May I request you, Aditi, to share a few words about your transition and motivation to join the healthcare industry?
First and foremost, good evening to everybody. And this is an honor to come back to the Institute and meet everybody from the alma mater and give it back. My journey with IHM Aurangabad began in 2006, and I was very clear with the focus that I wanted to pursue housekeeping as my forte, which I did. I started my journey with Leela Palace, Bangalore, as a management trainee, and then had a brief stint of reopening with Novotel Ahmedabad. I think that's where the calling for learning and development came in, wherein we had to reiterate trainings, and that's wherein I decided to transition into the world of L&D with Sodexo, a very brief stint with Jaslok Hospital, and now I'm with Healthcare IT. It is a wonderful world to see wherein you are able to help each individual become a best version of their own and be a part of someone's success story. So this is what I enjoy every day, day in and day out, and multiple opportunities what you get to be reverse mentored. So this would be it.
That's lovely. You are a shining example for the students of IHMA, and we are very proud of you. Our next panelist, Saigal, is an Assistant General Manager L&D, Healthcare Global Enterprises Limited at Bangalore. May I request you, Sanyam, to share with us your journey from hospitality to healthcare?
Sure. Very good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, firstly, to IHM for actually organizing this lovely platform. Thank you so much, and with Traveler now. Thank you. It's a brilliant opportunity. A little bit about me. I started my career with the Oberoi Group after passing out of IHM Aurangabad. I've been with them for 11 years and I moved to healthcare very recently, around 3 months ago. I think just like Aditi, the spark of learning and development started within me when I was in the Oberoi Center when we did our certified departmental trainer workshops. Post which I worked in operations in food and beverage and in front office for a couple of years, after which I moved on to learning and development. And I've been in L&D ever since because it has been my calling. Over the course of time, I have done certain certification to upskill myself. I'm a certified hospitality educator. I've done a Kirkpatrick certification in training evaluation. I am a certified master facilitator for the Oberoi Group in certified departmental trainings. And I upskilled myself a year before last how to teach people online also. And I'm an accelerated learning certified designer and practitioner. That's a little bit about me. And my journey in healthcare has been very short. So I can't talk much about it, but maybe I can get back on the platform after a couple of months and then maybe update you all. But it has been a brilliant learning in terms of expanding my horizons.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah. Thank you, Sanyam. Your insights and experience from working with diverse sectors will surely add value to our discussion. Our next panelist from the class of 2010 at IHMA, Rohneet Ahluwalia, is the Learning and Development Manager at ITC Grand Bharat, Gurugram, India. May I request you, Rohneet, to share with us your journey in the hospitality industry and your fondest memory from your alma mater.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinha. Good evening, everyone, and namaste. My name is Rohneet Ahluwalia, as ma'am has just mentioned. I am a graduate from IHM Aurangabad 2010 batch, just like Sam and Aditi have just mentioned as well. My journey with hospitality actually started with IHCL, something very similar to Tushar as well. I was a management trainee with the company for 2 years, of course. Post that, I was in the food and beverage department as a restaurant manager. My transition to learning and development has been very organic. It's been a movement from food and beverage operations to actually going back to my alma mater for 2 years, where I was teaching first year hospitality students in front office and food and beverage services as well. Just a natural transition from that, of course, was into the learning and development sphere currently, and of course, working for the past 2.5 years with ITC Hotels as well. Coming back to ma'am's question, my fondest memory of my alma mater is, of course, the experiences that I gained, not just as a student, but as a professor as well. It's about the relationships that we form at the time when we were students with each other, with our mentors, and then the natural transition of when my mentors actually became my peers as well. A completely different dynamic to the working style at the institute as well. And that is something that I will always cherish. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for that, Rohneet. You have been on the other side indeed, and we have seen you inspire our students in the other role too. And I can vouch for that, of course. So we wish you all the luck, and it's a proud moment for us at IHMA seeing you all soar so high. Thank you for taking out time to be with us today. Let us now move on to the discussion. The format of today's webinar would be a round of moderated questions to each panelist for 30 minutes and another round with a uniform question for 10 minutes, after which for the next 20 minutes, the floor will be open to a live audience question and answer. So I would request the audience to type their questions in the chat box. So we move on, and my first question is for Rohneet. What are the emerging challenges in skills training in the new workplace?
Thank you so much for the question, ma'am. I think that question has a three-pronged answer to it, actually. And the way to answer that question would to first, of course, begin with the changes that we have all recently seen in not just the environment, but the hospitality industry itself in regards to the past 1.5 years of the pandemic. There have been a lot of changes that have happened in the way the social behavior has been changed from how we interact with each other and how we interact with our guests on the shop floor as well. Keeping the same in mind, of course, those changes have now become a cultural aspect of any organization. And that is one of the main things that we look forward to when we are imparting any kind of skills knowledge or any attitudinal changes to our associates on the shop floor as well. Now, we, of course, in any hospitality organization have associates from different levels and of different employment methods as well. We have those who are currently on a long-term employment basis. We have some who are on a contractual basis. And then, of course, we have transitional associates in the hotel as well, such as industrial trainees who come to us from reputed institutes for their 6 months of training in the hotel. So when we talk about skills training and how that has actually changed, the entire impact of skills training has been in regards to the pandemic. And the changes that have happened, of course, is to keep in mind all the COVID-19 protocols that we have to take care of. The biggest challenges that we face nowadays is, of course, the transition from a theoretical and or utopian practical aspect in institutes to what happens on the shop floor in the hospitality organizations. What I basically mean by that is that a huge gap is currently in place as to what is taught at the institutional level and then what is actually practiced when you come to the hospitality organizations such as hotels. Of course, I can only speak on behalf of hotel organizations and not others. I'm sure my esteemed colleagues will be able to talk about the experiences in their own individual spheres as well. The biggest aspect, apart from the pandemic and what COVID-19 has done, of course, is to keep in mind the transitional nature of employment of associates as well. As I mentioned earlier, they are people who are in a long-term employment aspect of the hotel and those who are transitional or contractual. Currently, we are seeing a vast movement where we are seeing a more transitional and contractual based employment in the hotels. And the biggest challenge that we face with such a kind of employment, of course, is the aspect of organizational culture and imparting of skills that takes place is very transitional again. It is completely on and off. It's for a limited time period. An individual does not get the time to be able to adapt himself or herself to the shop floor realities and what it is required to actually function in this particular sphere. The second aspect of that we are currently facing is, of course, the changing guest profile. Five-star hotels, budget hotels, 4 stars, all the categories have had over a period of time established a set demographic who come and visit their particular hotels. What COVID-19 has actually done is that it's completely shuffled the type of demographics who are coming to the hotel and the type of guests who are coming in. And that has actually really impacted the way we deal with our guests on the shop floor. The skills which are being imparted now are way different than what we were doing earlier. The aspect of time, the essence of time has changed as well in terms of how we actually get guest requests handled as well. So these are some of the basic major challenges that we face in terms of our skills training. In terms of actual classroom training and the knowledge that we impart to our associates, that has also obviously changed, keeping in mind the COVID-19 protocols. Before, we used to have a lot of physical sessions in terms of imparting skills. Nowadays, that has obviously changed from a more physical to a more virtual aspect as well. With that, it brings its own advantages and disadvantages as well. The biggest advantage, of course, is that we are able to cover a vast variety and a vast, I would say, subset of individuals as well. Whereas the biggest disadvantage or challenge that comes in virtual training is the efficacy is missing. It's very difficult to be able to determine what is the efficacy of the training that is being imparted as well. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we face today in terms of skills training as well. Thank you so much.
Very well said, Ronnie. Thank you so much. This does, of course, guide us in understanding the new gaps which you said we have now. Like there are skills, there are skills, engagement, and learning. Apart from the new nature of employment which you have, and where the profile of the customers and workforce is changing. So, absolutely to the point. Thank you so much. Moving on to Sanyam now. My next question is to Sanyam. And the question is, what learning interventions has your organization initiated to build the capabilities of the employees to keep them personally and professionally relevant in the new normal?
Thank you, Dr. Meena, for the question. Just before I start getting into the main crux of the answer, I want to give a little bit of background. So I think the last 2 years have completely metamorphosized the way in which training is accessed, delivered, designed, and even consumed. With 1% of a actual work week, that's the amount of time that any learner gets to actually invest in the time of learning average all over the world, right? 1% of time that they have in a week, e-learning has actually been very beneficial to many organizations, because believe it or not, there is 60% more retention. And the fact of the matter is that people actually finish off their learning and development activities much faster than they would have done otherwise if they employ traditional training methods. So, just linking to what Ron said, the fact that, virtual learning, virtual onboardings, upskilling yourself in terms of how to take virtual trainings is something, again, that I think needs to be incorporated within the aspect of capability building. So, coming to capability building, because that's what your question was actually about. What have different organizations done? First and foremost, many organizations have gone ahead and upskill their learning managers how to take trainings of people when they go virtual. Now, surprisingly, the takeaway of learners from a virtual session vis-a-vis a in-person session is actually the same, and many studies prove that. But many learning managers are actually not trained to take these virtual trainings. The same training that we do online would be 1.5 times lengthier than you would do it in person, only because to manage the VUCA space is going to be very challenging. And many trainers, many learners are unfortunately not very trained in the etiquettes of virtual learning. So I think that's something that many organizations need to train people on the etiquettes of virtual learning. Number one. Number two, many companies actually invested a lot in their training programs in terms of onboarding people such as psychologists for mental health. They went ahead and they did that. There were some companies, tech companies, that actually went ahead and gave allowances to their people to build an office space at the workplace. So I've had my friends who work for the I'll unfortunately not be able to take names, but many people who basically have gone ahead and bought Apple laptops only because their company gave them the allowance to actually do so. One more interesting thing that I was reading, and I came across this a couple of weeks ago, was that to increase the training interventions, to increase people's interaction virtually, they involve a lot of senior leadership into their training programs, which actually escalated people's participation within training. One more thing that people did to basically upskill people is to ensure that they actually get a lot of downtime. So there were companies that actually gave people extended weekends. They were called recharge weekends. So basically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was off only because there was too much of virtual meetings that were going on. Some companies do it differently, where they say once in a week there'll be no virtual meetings at all, and they follow it strictly. So I think these are a couple of things that companies did. Apart from that, I think I would also like to say that capability building is something which is going to be superbly important for people. And when it comes to hotels in particular, I think one aspect that people have really looked at, especially my company, my erstwhile company, was that they looked at a program known as multi-skilling. So what they did is that they ensured that every person in the company is trained in different departments so that they have a better future, they have a brighter future, and the company builds on a competitive advantage of learning from their own people. So a very interesting study again said that these resources are from e-learning industry, the training industry, and so on and so forth. We can read them later. Said that 25% of people actually moved jobs during the past 2 years. However, 75% still stayed back, which means that it is our responsibility as an organization to upskill them and to retrain them so that they can benefit and they can look at a future which is brighter and better, keeping in mind the organization's focus also. And I just want to end by saying one more thing, that the sphere of learning, in my opinion, has drastically changed from what it was to what it is now. And when I say this, what I mean to say is that formal learning is being replaced by informal learning. You could be in the cafeteria learning, you could be walking home learning, you could be sitting in the cab learning, and that's something which is very different from traditional learning methods. And I think many companies have learned to realize that, and those companies that realize that sooner than later will be the ones that actually survive the test of time. I'm done. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much, Sanyam. You see, it does help us understand the impact of your preferred training methods. The new measure of success ultimately is to elevate the employee learning experience. Now, how you do it, upskilling, multi-skilling, for cross-functional skills. So it's all about probably innovating and curating the learning designs with digital transformations, along with engaging and empowering, probably everything for that experience, right? I just appreciate that part also. Anytime, anywhere kind of a training for the people, for the new age professionals in particular, right?
Yeah.
So I quite agree on that. Thank you. The next question is for Aditi. Millennials view corporate training differently. How have you redefined it for your organization?
Thank you so much, Dr. Meena. I think all of us belong to millennial generations. So when I say I have kept ourselves in the limelight while I answer this, and I would build a little bit on what Rohneet and Sanyam have said, that there is a little discrepancy between what is taught in colleges, institutions, and versus what the students get to see in the industry. And like Sanyam said, that the learning consumption and delivery has changed magnificently in the last 2 years. What I personally have observed is collaborating with millennials and Generation Z by aligning their personal goals and your organizational goals makes them feel involved. As millennials, they don't want to randomly take instructions and do things. They want to get actively involved. So one best practice what we do is we ask them to come up with, once the OJT is done, we ask them to pick up a problem statement in the OJT, come up with a solution and see the viability of executing that solution, which actually exercises their gray cells. So the entire learning experience becomes pretty holistic. That is one thing what I would recommend. Second thing what I would recommend is, as millennials, I think we crave for feedback, constructive and timely feedback, so that we are able to work on the action items better. Last but not the least, we would like we have had our reporting managers create something called IDP, that is individual development plan for every employee, so that they feel invested in. Millennials are not going to be enamored by cash prizes. I think it is the quality time, quality assignments that you give them, how you give a holistic engagement experience would make a lot of difference. So that is one area where we could build on. And like I say, I think the time has come wherein the reporting managers and learning and development managers become career architects for the younger generation and help them maneuver the way forward. And I would just like to conclude by saying Rohini got a very nice points by mentioning that how do I assess the impact? So yes, ROI is one definite way, but I think when it shows the impact in terms of a lifestyle change, I think that would also be appreciated. How does it transcend into a behavioral change? So as simple as a hand wash technique, which was very, very important and would continue to remain important for hotels across the globe. I think people teaching their peers, educating the strata in the society definitely would make a lot of difference. So a lot of collaborative learning is something what we engage and would like to make a difference in.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Aditi. This indeed helps us gain insights into how the corporate training L&D professionals are looking at the evolving trends. And I quite share that millennials and zennials have to be handled differently. They need to be mentored and coached, and you have to probably strike a training program which is more balanced with both the kinds of skills. So
Absolutely.
quite in tune with what you're saying. Thank you so much. We will come back to this discussion on another question in a while. So moving on to Tushar, my final question is to Tushar actually. How can educational institutions reorient themselves to close the skills gap to serve the industry better? Aditi also touched this that it needs to be integrated in the curriculum. It's probably about the applied skills, practical skills.
Absolutely. In fact, I think that's a fantastic question. Also, a lot of my peers have also touched upon some of these aspects where I will draw linkages from. So the first is definitely to upgrade and make our content a little more relevant. And I think what we learned maybe a year ago may not be relevant, or 2 years ago may not be relevant. Something as simple as the kind of equipments we use, chemicals we use, to even the new age competencies and skills across levels, whether it is operations, housekeeping, front office, F&B, or even if it is managerial skills and competencies, we've seen a change across the board. So there are new priorities, there are new processes, and these new age competencies are what we need to realize. And I remember Rohneet also touching upon it. So that's the first thing. Our content, our curriculum needs to get revised, updated, more relevant now with the new time. Secondly, I would suggest it's a need to not only for the academic but also for the students to not just specialize but generalize. In the past we focus a lot on first generalizing and then specializing, but we are going slightly back in time where we want associates, we want colleagues to be able to do more than just that bit. So the more knowledge we have across the hotel, if we are a complete hotelier, if we are a complete business leader or a manager, we definitely stand a bigger chance in the market here. So that is one tip I would suggest for everyone, whether it is the faculties or the institutions or the students. We need to be able to take more on the platter. The third one is about being able to handle ambiguity and change, and even stress, I would say. So organizations in the last 2 years, which have also been able to sustain, other ones which have been able to adapt to the times. So being able to develop this quality of being able to manage quick change, being able to handle stress, being able to adapt quickly, come up with just-in-time solutions, a quick ability to change not just yourself but your teams down the line and your organization as a whole is a skill which we need to build upon. And I think this was a learning in the last 2 years which we need to carry forward. Another thing which comes to my mind is about continuous connect. I think Sanyam somewhere suggested that there are new and modern sources of learning. There are new forms and sources of learning. We need to leverage those and not just rely upon them. So yes, people learn while traveling. We attend meetings while traveling. We learn all the while. Self-learning is it's a fad these days. So, but we still need to guide the students. There is a lot of matter up there, and just browsing any content will not help. So somewhere there needs to be a focused approach towards guiding when it comes to even open sources of learning, online sources of learning. And lastly, I would suggest the new forms of interaction have also allowed us to maintain a continuous connect and mentoring with the students. So I think not just in the classroom, even offline, online, we need to look at, even while we are not physically present, I think somewhere the industry can maintain a better connect with the students across their 3 or 4 years of studies. Constant mentoring and connect will help us to churn out together. The industry and the college will be able to churn out a much finer product by the end of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Tushar. This will help us prepare our students get aligned to the new corporate world with right mindset, better and faster. Not just during tentative disruptions, but also any uncertainties, basically preparing them with combination of all critical skills, new age skills, whether they are hard, soft, technical, functional, business, and for global leadership, right? Incidentally, my research study also, which I did is being converted now into a book, talks about the military kind of a style leadership and the convergent combination model. So I quite share the things you have mentioned here. So moving on from here now to the next segment, we have a common question to everyone now. And the question is, what type of training and development strategy would you suggest to an organization as a sustainable solution? So, Aditi, would you like to go for it first?
Sure, Dr. Meena. Thank you so much. I think I would draw on the insights shared by all the panelists here. First thing to do to have a sustainable strategy would begin with redefining the duration of the modules. So, engaging in something called micro learning or capsule learning would be the first step. I mean, rather than having 1 hour session, maybe just a 15-minute session. So if I could give you a simple example from the housekeeping standpoint, how do I fold a bath towel can be a simple micro learning. They do it hands-on and they are free off to go. So that is one initiative what we could take. Second thing is like if we look at the industry and institution gap, I think paying more weightage, assessing the performance in the OJTs would be more beneficial than only looking at academia based projects, which would help the industry to benefit from the role that students play and vice versa. Third thing would be use a lot of informal learning tools, which Sayam did mention some time back. Maybe just use an advertisement to create a moment of truth, or maybe just play a 30-minute video clip and ask employees to, just share one paragraph summary and gamify that, make it into a competition so that people really look forward to it. And last but not the least, as all of us know, the learning and development has changed because of the COVID situation. I think revising and revisiting our processes and procedures, keeping in mind the current VUCA, would also, help us to be viable, sustainable, and scalable for the near future to come in.
Yes. So what I take it is that it's learning in small bites,
Yes,
based on
learning in
your,
small bites.
and then based on the
Yes,
training need analysis, which creates
yes.
probably simulatory and participative experiences, right?
Absolutely, Dr. Meena. And just to conclude, I think while doing training need analysis, we generally reach out to the department heads, but seldom do we reach out to the end user and ask where is the problem lying. So I think reaching out to that end user who's going to be the consumer of your learning is equally important, because the manager can give you a summary, but the individual will tell exactly what are the needs. So I would like to
Absolutely
conclude here.
valid. Yes. Thank you so much. Ronnie, how
Pleasure.
about you?
Actually, Aditi's spoken a lot of good ideas that probably first came to me as well. I would like to add on to what Aditi has mentioned as well by just saying that yes, the whole aspect of shorter training sessions, wherein you're able to impart the training that you are trying within the time period that you have done, because as we all know that any audience for that matter has a maximum of a 20-minute span in which they're able to assess, they're able to absorb what is being told to them. Any session beyond a 15 to 20-minute session is basically when the audience would basically switch off, and whatever the trainer is actually saying is not something that is being absorbed or taken in by the trainee as well. So one of the basic aspects of sustainable training methods, of course, is the 15-minute sessions that Aditi mentioned. Over and above that, of course, we can also introduce aspects such as wines or 60-second knowledge snippets as well. Sharing these small snippets, considering the fact that we are talking about millennials, we are talking about zillennials as well, who are all media savvy, who are all on social media all the time, and that is actually the way they learn things. They are not attuned to classroom training anymore. That is how we can actually use social media as a platform to be able to impart training session in that aspect as well. One of the basic things that I feel that training is, of course, is both transitional and at the same time transactional as well. What is being said and what is being done on behalf of the trainer needs to be absorbed by the trainee, and the only way we're able to do that is if we have a set evaluation in place. How do we actually look into the aspect of what has been trained, has been absorbed, what has been absorbed is being practiced, what is being practiced is being learned. It's just going back to the fact is, if you give a man a fish, you just feed him for a day, but if you teach him to fish, you feed him for life as well. So that is something that we must always look into, as to how do we evaluate whether or not the training has been done. So evaluation is very important, and I do not mean immediate evaluation. I mean an evaluation that might be after a month or 2 months of when the training has happened, because that is the time period when you actually are able to see whether the person has been able to take the training onto the shop floor and have done something about it as well. So those are the snippets that I would definitely want to share as part of your question. Thank you.
Absolutely, Ronnie. It's not just TNA, but it is also the right kind of evaluation tools and continuous measurement, not just one time frame. Quite agree to that too. Thank you. Sanyam, your take now.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity again to talk. All right. So I think one of the major things that companies perhaps need to look at and be very focused about is the fact that this is one of the best times for learning and development to demand a seat at the business table. Um, if we are able to make use of the virtual platforms and get metrics from those virtual platforms, it is going to be a great sustainable strategy for learning and development, and in turn for the organization. Like some of us said, one of the challenges of L&D has always been the fact that metrics of training are lack, especially in hotels. Metrics are very much defined for the operational department, but they lack gravely and greatly in learning and development. So having these metrics in place, especially with the ease of moving away from archaic and, I would say, legacy learning management systems to more agile, more flexible learning experience systems, is something that organizations can look at to ensure that we are embodying a long-term strategy for learning and for the survival of the organization. One more point I wanted to talk about is the fact that all of us in training know about the 70-20-10 rule, right? 70% of the learning takes place on the shop floor, 20% takes place through our peers, and 10% actually takes place in the learning classroom, which is nothing. So I think because of the virtual world now and how things have been moving on, most of the training will take place in the classroom. So how are you going to make that engaging? What are you going to be doing to ensure that people are engaged? And one of the things that I can recommend is that instead of looking at training events, and I'm going to take in a little bit about what Aditi and Ron said right now, instead of doing just 15-minute sort of droppers and shockers, whilst they are the best way to engage people, create a learning journey for them, create a learning roadmap for them, so that they learn when they want to learn, not when they are being taught. So I think that's something that people really would love, more than having that sort of a flexibility. I think is very important for an organization. One more thing that we need to ask ourselves is the fact that, are people learning something that which is not being taught, or are we teaching programs that are not being learned? So I think that's something which we as learning managers need to ask ourselves. And we need to really build upon networking. I think one of the biggest learnings that happen within an organization is through networking. And a great example of that is, again, from my erstwhile organization. There are so many best practices only in the field of learning and development that each individual unit does, that you can actually take from. And you'll be shocked to know that so many companies actually fail to understand what all they can learn from within themselves. I think these are a few of the things that we can definitely cation on. And I want to leave people with one last thought. I think embracing synchronous and asynchronous learning in day-to-day training programs. That means whether the facilitator is present or he's not present, the learning still continues. The learning journey still happens, is going to be the differentiator in creating a sustainable strategy for the future.
Very
Thank
impressive. Thank you so much, Sayam. This indeed does call for a lot of, it's a thought-provoking process, absolutely. We need to create a roadmap to create those agile and flexible
Yeah.
systems. And also, you see, it's about networking with the right kind of people. So it's like partnerships for the new ecosystem, right? And how we create that roadmap, we all need to give it a structured, diligent thought. Thank you so
Very
much.
true. Sorry, doctor. I just want to say one more thing. Whilst I spoke about convergent thinking, I also want to talk about divergent thinking. There are so many organizations actually learning from each other. So there were some studies which I read where actually people have gone to, one organization A took them to organization B that didn't have any KPIs, and they were shocked. And then they said, "How does this company do what it does?" So I think learning not just within ourselves but from different industries is going to be very important.
Absolutely. So thank you for that, Sanyam. Tushar, now how about your views?
I think nothing is left for me, but I'll still take a few minutes. So I
Take a
liked
shot.
some of
Sure.
the points which came from my peers. So whether it was experiential learning, which came from Aditi, to Rohneet mentioning about evaluation, I think there are some important points which came out. But yes, it is the difference between andragogy and pedagogy. It's the difference between teaching a child versus teaching an adult. So, how do you become a facilitator? How do you adopt the role of a facilitator, a coach, or a mentor, or a guide? I think that's more important than becoming a teacher. We need to, especially with the current generation and with the kind of new forms of learning that we are seeing, we cannot be prescriptive. So knowledge is everywhere. We just need to, of course, guide our folks in the right direction, but we should not be focusing too much on giving out knowledge. I think that's an easy one. What our focus should be is should our focus should be on igniting minds. We should be able to make people think. We should be able to make them ready for any situation. So be it now or be it 20 years down the line. If your teaching, if your content and training has been only effective for the next few months or years, then it's not effective. But if your learnings and teachings go a long way in developing that person, I would say as long as a lifelong learning, I think those are the biggest trainers who teach for life and not just for a couple of years. So yes, group work, a lot of assignment based. If you look at the Bloom's model, also talks about training people at different levels. So the higher the level, the more long term is the learning. And as far, I'm sure lifelong is not possible these days, but as long as possible, if your learning impacts a person for a longer time, that's the outcome of a great training program. And that's where I would draw upon Sanyam when he said, draw a learning path, continuous learning. I think these are some ways to ensure that your learning has a longer term impact.
Indeed, it's all about that impact, and we got to teach them, prepare them for life, right? That is the ultimate goal in life for us. So, well, we have now completed this segment, and this was very engaging and insightful indeed. Thank you so much. The floor is now open for live question and answer for the panelists. Let us take the first audience question. So, is this what we have here? Who is this from? Does various virtual internship from various organizations play a good role in CV?
I think, okay, I'll take that question. That's perfectly fine. I can guess what the gentleman is or the lady is coming from, actually.
Go for it.
Certainly, ma'am. So considering the fact that we've been discussing about the impact of the pandemic and how the trainings have moved on from the physical to the virtual sphere, yes, that is a very valid question as to whether or not will virtual trainings be taken in any serious manner when it comes to your curriculum vitae. That is a good question, and I think it is the same as any physical training session as well. It would depend on what the training was all about. It would depend on where the training was conducted, who conducted the training, and what was the actual training which was being conducted. It is all about what the message was and exactly what it was that you have achieved out of it as well. I believe it's always about the experience that you have gained and how you're able to use that experience practically. Honestly speaking, at the end of the day, it does not matter what your collegiate background might be, how many marks you might have achieved in college or school, etc. At the end of the day, it is what do you bring to the table on behalf of the trainings that you have completed. So yes, Any kind of internship would have an impact on your curriculum vitae, but at the end of the day, it would be what you have actually done about it, is what the main question would any interview panelist would actually ask as well.
I hope that answers your question, food and beverage world. Uh, so thank you so much, Ronnie, for that.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, over to the next question. If we can have the next question. Oh, that's from one of our alumnus, Siddhant Kapai. How can organizations use applied learning methods to generate organizational agility and flexibility? So, who would like to go for this?
I'll take this one.
Go for it.
All right. So I think when he talks about applied learning methods, I believe Siddhant is referring to the already existing learning methods within hotels and within hospitality organizations. And Siddhant, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm seeing the chat as we speak. So I think one of the things that is going to be very important right now for learning and development managers within each and every hotel sphere is the fact that many people have been home for a long time. It's very important that when they come into the system, they be trained on basics of not only handling guests as in soft skill models or a few soft skill modules, but also going down to basics of basic tasks, like for example how to take an order, how to strip a bed, how to make a bed. These basic tasks people are reskilled or retrained on before they hit the shop floor, I think people will be more agile and more flexible. And I think when it comes to an organization, I mean, we can take some learnings from universities. So many universities around the globe now who are specifically hotel management, who have hotel management courses. Even if they are chefs there, they are making them do virtual demonstrations, and they are telling them to put together a small presentation on every step of from the raw material till the final product, and they're being judged on that. Now I know this is not the most the best way to perhaps go ahead and design a learning curriculum or to teach people skills, but considering the fact that we are still in the midst of travel bans and so on and so forth, this is the best that any organization can do. And I think we need to look at flexible ways of trying to upskill our people so that we as an organization become more agile and more flexible. I hope I've been able to answer, and the other panelists can add something if they'd like to add.
Yes.
Ron, Aditi, anyone would like to add, or anyone?
Please feel free to.
I'll just add a
Sure.
point to what Sanyam mentioned. And I think when we say organizational agility and flexibility, it also is an outcome of how we are equipping our team members to relearn and unlearn based on the recent happenings. And I think a lot of companies now are focusing on efficiency. And if your team is able to take on more than what they were 2 years back, automatically you see people growing. There is a constant churn improvement. I've seen a lot of people grow in the last 2 years, and that's because of this focus on L&D and including all these learning methods that you've just heard from Sanyam. But yes, if you make your teams more efficient, uh, be able to widen their learning, then I think this is the right time to also have a lot of growth around you. I've seen lot of companies, even in our company, a lot of growth and transfers and movements and restructuring was only possible because we were able to upskill and reskill our team members.
So I just want to also add something here just before we close the question, Siddhant. The fact that actually speaking, hospitality is one of the highest industries when it comes to learning flexibility. There's a report that I'll be happy to share with you. Actually, it states that we were actually the highest industry to be able to quickly move from just a coping stage to a developing stage and to a nourishing stage when it came to learning and development during the pandemic, where many other industries were not able to do so. We had the highest settling ratio, settling rate, and apart from conglomerates and telecoms. So these were the top three, but hospitality was actually number one, which is amazing.
We even learned from healthcare.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So That was pretty elaborate, sir. Thank you so much. I hope that answers your question well, Siddhant. So, can we move to the next question now? That's from one of our faculty, Mr. Khalid Parvez. In terms of facilitating new training, what is the new modus operandi to achieve anticipatory service whilst maintaining the COVID-19 protocols now being imparted on hotels? So, who would like to take this?
Tushar, would you like to go first, or do you want me to
Tushar,
start off with something?
I can do that. So I think it's about see anticipation. You use the word anticipatory service, which was relevant then, now, and will always be relevant, in especially in hospitality. So all the trick here is to understand the guest needs, and in the last couple of years, the needs have changed. So if you're able to focus on safety, if you're able to focus on these protocols, your anticipation does not go out. In fact, the more you are able to preempt what the guest need may be, and be able to reduce those fears in the minds of the guests. Even if if you just saw after the first pandemic, in fact, when the guests came back, there was a sense of fear in the market. But the moment, as an industry, you were able to demonstrate that you are confidently ready to welcome them and host them through a lot of initiatives, I think that itself showed as an industry that we were able to understand what the needs are. And once the guests are in the hotel, at every touch point, whether it is check-in, whether it is all the contactless services, be in F&B and other areas, I think those are naturally, and already we've been witness to it, that it's been taken well by the customer. That's because these are anticipation, these are examples of anticipation in these times.
And I'll just like to add something over here, just like exactly what Tushar said as well. You know, just coming back to Mr. Parvez's question, the aspects of different moments of truth have just increased with the COVID-19 protocols. They have not decreased. You know, guests who are coming to our hotels still request the same, have the same preferences, still have the same requests. The only thing that has changed is, of course, the moments of truth have changed in terms of COVID-19 protocols. Now we're trying to maintain as much social distancing as possible. We're trying to ensure that safety protocols are there. Ozonization and misting of rooms is taking place. Guests are, valet services have reduced. There's so many things which have happened in which the moments of truth have increased, but they've not decreased as such per se. And anticipating guest needs will always remain the same, whether it is food and beverage service, whether it is front office, whether it is housekeeping, in terms of personalization, whether it is food and beverage production in terms of personalization of meals as well. All those things in terms of anticipating the guest dietary requirements, the guests' room requirements, the guest stay requirements in terms of special occasions, moments, so on and so forth, they all remain the same. It's just the fact that we are now looking into making sure that we follow COVID-19 protocols while still being able to anticipate guest needs and make sure that we are able to delight our guests and exceed expectations as well.
Doctor, if it's okay, Ron, may I add one more point over here on this question? I think Ron has explained it very nicely. I just want to maybe think of it from Khalid's perspective. I think with the mask being on, okay, more than 50% of your face is actually covered, and then to preempt, guest needs may be a little difficult because you may find it difficult to read people's facial expressions, but studies also prove that more than 70% of your actual expressions, or you can actually read people's faces from the nose above 70% of the times. So I think, like Ron said, nothing is going to change in terms of anticipation or anticipatory service. What will change, however, is our observation of people's micro behaviors when they come to our servicescapes. I think that's something that people need to be trained on, because people are not trained on that. So I think more training, more focus in terms of understanding and noticing micro behaviors of guests will be very important.
So apart from foresight, it's also about understanding the nature of the behavior of the customers, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question. Yes, we do have time for one. So this is from Sahil saying, how important is organizational culture and its implementation for facilitation of business profits through the different organizational operational variables. Who would like to take this?
Aditi, would you like to take this one?
I think this is
I
a
I can
three-pronged
go ahead. I can
question.
start.
So Sayam, why don't you go ahead and probably I'll just continue after you.
Sure. So I think the question is very simple, as in how does organizational culture transcend across the organization for profit making? So I'll just reiterate something that Mr. Oberoi said. Take care of your guests and the money will follow. It's as simple as that. So I don't have a very intellectual answer for this one, but I can tell you this, that choose a company that has a culture which is strongly driven, especially at the time of orientations and inductions, and in the first 6 months of a new joiner joining, versus a company that has lesser focus on these aspects. The profit will automatically go down because there is no common goal. There is no focus between people collaborating with each other and behaving in a manner that is conducive for the organization and for themselves and for their own growth. So I think that's my answer. Culture is I think should be omnipresent.
Well said, Sayam.
Omnipresent.
Well said. That's a very nice word. Just to add on, I think how the orientation and induction programs live up to the employer branding are also, very good yardstick to see how the culture transcends itself, right from your process of recruitment, how the recruiter behaves with you, or how does your reporting manager take your interview. There are a lot of unsaid words, unsaid gestures, which make a lot of impact. So I think you cannot isolate organization culture, but it is a part of every interaction with every stakeholder, is what I would say.
All right.
Great.
I think, would you like to
I
add
read,
something to share?
I just read somewhere, I recall. So culture eats strategy for breakfast, innovation for lunch, and digital transformation for dinner.
That's
So I think
true.
Indeed.
Actually, I
anything
was
else
coming to
falls in
Very
lag
true.
if
Yeah.
Well
culture is
apt.
not in
Yeah.
place.
Aptly put indeed. So there's this last question which we will go for. This is from our Dean, Mr. Rishad Kavina, and I just read it. There has been a discussion on how important it is for the industry to partner with academia to enhance student learning over and above the traditional OJT or internship model. What will it take for such collaborative learning, including live projects, to be implemented going forward to make the students ready for the industry? Now, all this has been said here, so what do you suggest for this one now? Who would like to go for it? I think all of you should.
I think Ron should go first because he has experience with both these fields, and then maybe we can
Yes,
add on.
No, I mean,
absolutely.
honestly, I read that question earlier in the chat, so I guess I
Yeah.
might have a head start on the question as such per se.
Great.
Sorry. I think one of the biggest challenges, as we've already mentioned over here, is of course the gap between the institutes and the industry itself. And I think this is a very relevant question. How do we actually fill the gap? And that is the question and the need of the hour. And one of the easiest ways to do that, of course, is for an active collaboration between hospitality organizations and education institutes as well. One of the easiest examples that I can actually provide at the moment is the recent tie-up of ITC hotels with EHL in terms of learning and development trainings, which will be instituted for 250 students across India in their four major properties as well, which is a very natural and organic way of inculcating students from various parts of the country into the learning and development sphere and training them in terms of practical application and skills on the shop floor. So this is students who will be coming from educational institutes, going to the hotels and just training their skills and their skill sets in terms of to make them ready for the industry when they're joining as well. So that is definitely one way of doing the same. One of the second major aspect, of course, is to be able to align ourselves with the UGC or NCERT as well in terms of making sure that whatever curriculum is being provided at the moment is one which has not been in course for the last 15, 20 years, but one which is currently being made by people who are within the industry, people who are experiencing the industry at the moment, and those who know about the current trends of the industry as well. We are all aware of the fact that hospitality trends change almost on a biannually basis. And keeping that in mind, we must ensure that these kind of aspects are shared with the universities as well, and active collaboration needs to be there to ensure that this gap remains filled as well. Thank you. Anyone else?
I can add something if that's okay. So whilst Ron was talking, something has just sort of clicked, and I just want to highlight one or two things. So I think, firstly, Mr. Kavina, really nice to know that you've asked a question. It's so nice to see that you're there. Okay, so a very quick thing. I think the Oprah Group used to do something known as the Bridge program. Now, this word bridge was a bridge between the hotels and educational institutes. So we run this program in a couple of our major cities where we actually invite hotel management faculty to the hotel to upskill them, to train them in what is currently happening in the industry in terms of the reality of things, and then they go ahead and then they go back into their institution and start training the students. I think that's something that we can really look at, and we don't need to wait for a hotel to reach out to the institution. The institution can reach out to the hotel because it's a win-win. And any good hotel brand would love to do this. And we've seen such great feedback coming in from people because of this initiative. That's number one. Number two, one of the other live projects that we can actually look at, sir, is that when the students come to the hotels for industrial training, instead of giving them a logbook, we should maybe look at giving them a project to solve so that they get into understanding what is actually happening in the hotel. And that project could be co-decided by the learning manager and by those students. Thank you, Smita. And last but not the least, I think I know and I understand that the curriculums inside institutes can't just be changed. There are many authorities governing it. I totally get that. But I think focus inside the classrooms to move away from, again, archaic, syllabus. I understand we need to know about, mother sources, derivatives, but do we really need to know 10 examples of an hors d'oeuvre? Maybe not. No hotel in India probably even serves it. Okay, classical French ones. But what do they need to know? They need to know what are the trends rather that are happening inside Michelin star restaurants. What is what are people looking at? And apart from IHM Aurangabad, I don't know any other institution that actually has this sort of focus. So I think these are 2-3 things that we can look at to bridge the gap between education and reality of what actually happens inside hotels. I hope I was able to answer the question, sir.
Yes, you did. So I guess we have come to the end of this program now. That was the final question. And to conclude, I would like to say that this panel discussion has highlighted the importance of continued training and basically learning and development, which is more critical now, right? As a talent management strategy. So it has to be more people-centric. Of course, it requires investing in training programs that improve productivity, well-being, and culture. So the other takeaways probably which have registered well with me are, while grappling with the shrinking workforce, we also have to not only think of hiring, but also retaining the talent by upskilling, reskilling, and multi-skilling for the sustainable growth, since shelf life of career skills falls, right? So, and the gaps which Ronnie talked of are the skills gap, engagement gap, and the learning gap. So that's basically is the bottom line, and we got to be a little more probably cater to the millennials and zillennials in a particular way, so they can probably access the training models anytime and anywhere for the corporate trainings. And we got to design a multifaceted continuous learning framework, strengthen companies for future disruptions, like said by Tushar, by developing employees' critical digital and cognitive capabilities, social and emotional and adaptability, basically all this in place as a combination. And also, like we talked of the active collaborations to bridge the programs. So, well, that's what it has been, and we come to this end of the grand discussion. I thank all the panelists for their valuable time, insights, and our audience for their active participation. We will again next week be here with another enriching Thursday Talk series. Till then, stay safe, stay strong.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.